First way, so students are often asked, well, how do I get started doing research? If I'm interested in a particular topic, how do I find more about that topic? Well, one thing, of course, is for your professor in the class, you could ask the professor. Um, but another thing that you can do is, well, there are people whose job it is to help you find research for your whatever project you're engaged in. HKU employs quite a number of these people, and they're called librarians. So here's a job description of a librarian. Librarians help people find information and conduct research for personal and professional use. So one thing you can do is go to HKU's website, and there is a thing you can click that says Ask a Librarian, where you can click it and then ask a librarian a question. But you can also go down to the library in person when there isn't a pandemic and ask a librarian in person. So that's one way to get started, is librarians can help you find information that's relevant to your research. This is just general. It's not just for this class, but any other class that you might have. Another place that I like to go is Google Scholar. So Google Scholar is a searchable repository. It's not a repository because it doesn't have the actual articles, but it has links to all the article titles and abstracts and article locations for any topic that you might want. So if you go to Google Scholar, unlike regular Google, which returns just any web page, Google Scholar will return academic articles about any topic that you type into the search bar. So you can put in philosophers, you can put in titles of papers that you're interested in finding, you can put in topics that you're interested in looking for. Google Scholar is a great place to start. Also, there are some resources that are specific to philosophy. So if you just want background in some philosophical idea, you want it to be explained to you, there are two philosophy-specific online encyclopedias. One is called the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and that's the first link that's up here. You can go to the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and I think it has pretty accessible articles for undergraduate students. In addition, there is a more scholarly, higher-end philosophy encyclopedia called the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is available here at plato.stanford.edu. This, I find, can sometimes be harder for students to understand. It's a little bit how some articles on Wikipedia are more complicated than they don't really explain them in ordinary parlance, like physics articles or mathematics articles. This can be difficult for a non-expert, but it is a place that you can go for a general overview of things. In addition, there's a philosophy journal that's devoted to giving sort of overview articles called Philosophy Compass. And if they've published an article on a topic that you're interested in, that's a great place to get started for finding out what the relevant research is and which other articles you should be reading. Also, there is a website called Phil Papers, and it's available here at philpapers.org. And it has a bibliography section. So if you know which topic you're already interested in, you can see if they have a bibliography on that topic. And then that will give you a list of different papers that are relevant to that topic. So this is a great way. If you don't want to ask a librarian or your professor because you're afraid of them, here's some other resources to get started. I think these are good places to get started, right? But I wouldn't use encyclopedias, for example, as the primary sources that you're citing in your philosophy papers, right? Let's see. So where to find philosophy papers. So this is where to find which papers you should be reading, but then how do you go find those papers? After you read the encyclopedia article and then it told you what the relevant literature was, how do you then go find that literature? Well, if you're on Phil Papers, you can just use Phil Papers. Oftentimes, authors have uploaded their own papers that they have the rights to that very website, and you can just find it there. If you know the name of the author and the article, frequently you can find it at their personal website. So here's a website just as an example of my friend and colleague William Starr. And if you click this and you go to his website, it has all of his published research in easily accessible, downloadable forms right there on his personal website. Additionally, you could just Google the article title, and frequently it will have been posted on somewhere on Google. If the author is still alive, you can email the author. There are places that you can, so like there's a Facebook group called the Philosophical Underclass, and if something's not in your library and it's not online and you can't find any other way to access it, this Facebook group is for those sorts of people. You can request an article, and then they will, other people who might have access to the article when you don't, for example, your library doesn't have access to it, you can go there, right? So how do you find the article? Well, these are some ways. Obviously, HKU's, I forgot to put a slide here, but HKU's library website is going to be useful as well, because you can go there and see if you can find the article there by searching for it. Right. Okay. So just to close out the video, I want to talk about when you ought to be citing somebody, and then how to go about citing them. So in general, if you're using someone's words verbatim, that is exactly, you're using the exact words that they used, you need to cite them. That is, you need to put their words that you're quoting in quote marks to make it clear that it's someone else's words. And then you need to cite them by saying who it was and what the source was and which particular page that quotation came from. So by author, you might say their name. Then source, you would put the year that it was published, because at the bottom you'll have your work cited, and then you'll have the full citation there. And then put the page number that the quote comes from. Things that you should never do is never ever copy somebody else's words and then just change a few of those words to synonyms, right? This is a thing that students do. They think they can get away with it. They can't get away with it. Don't do that. That is plagiarism. Just changing a few words is not making it your own ideas, not making it your own words, right? Secondly, never ever translate a source and then present that translation as original work of your own. This has only happened to me once, that I had to fail a student for doing this. I discovered it because it was a very bad translation that took Gottlob Frege's name and translated it to Lenovo Soul. So don't think you can be sneaky. I have definitely caught people doing stuff like that. Additionally, and this is something that students often don't realize about plagiarism, if you're using someone else's ideas, you need to cite them as well, right? Obviously, you're not going to cite a page number because you're just citing their general ideas, but if you got an idea from somebody else, presenting it as though it's your own idea is also plagiarism, even if you don't use any of their exact words. And this has definitely happened, that I've caught students doing this, where, for instance, there's a particular objection to a theory, and then there's a reply to the objection, and they steal the reply from some other source and then do not even mention the source that they stole the reply from. And you can tell that it's stolen because they use all the same words. They even name the reply the same thing, right? If you're taking somebody else's ideas, then you need to cite them. Finally, how do you go about citing? I will just give you my way. So as a philosopher, I don't really care about the format that you use. It would be nice if you use a single format for all your different citations. Then it's less messy and I could more easily figure it out. But sometimes your other professors are going to want you to use specific formats, like the APA format, the MLA format, the Chicago Manual of Style. And so how do I go about finding citations? So the way I do it is, once I have the paper and name, then and making sure those citations are formatted correctly. So once I have the paper and name, I go to Google Scholar, I type it in. In this case, I typed in Russell and then on denoting, and then here's what showed up. The first hit is Russell's on denoting, and if you look down here, right at the bottom of that first hit, there's a star there. That's if you want to favorite it. But then there's also these quote marks. If you click the quote marks, this text box shows up that says cite, and then it gives you all the different formats, the main formats, MLA, APA, Chicago Manual Style, and so on. And then you can just copy and paste this directly into your paper. That way you're always getting the correct citation formats, and you don't have to do any work like figuring out what the APA Manual of Style says, how to cite this particular source or that particular source. So this is what I think is the easiest way to do it. Just copy and paste from Google Scholar and in order to do your bibliography at the end of your paper. All right, so that's all I had to say. I think I should emphasize that while I said a few things about plagiarism, you should definitely familiarize yourself with all of HKU's resources on plagiarism. So if you just type into Google HKU, what is plagiarism, it will bring you to a big resource page that has a bunch of different information about what HKU considers plagiarism. And this is important because the things I've talked about are mostly what's relevant for philosophy, people stealing other people's words, people stealing other people's ideas, but there's lots of other ways to plagiarize. So for your other classes, you definitely want to familiarize yourself with like stealing other people's data, for instance, is also a way, stealing other people's graphs, that sort of thing. Those usually don't come up in philosophy because we don't have data, but they might come up in your other classes. So don't trust that I've just told you everything you need to know. Do look at HKU's resources there. All right, so this ends the video series on how to write a philosophy paper. Later in the week, we're going to have some tutorial sections where I'm just going to answer questions from people. All right, so thanks and see you guys later.